All right, hi, and welcome to the first episode of our WAGGGS Western Hemisphere governance webinars. Today, we're here to talk about how to recruit the best board ever. My name is Marnie Hall, and I am a Western Hemisphere regional governance consultant, and I am not alone.
No, Marnie's here with me. My name is Angela Dawson. Like Marnie, I am also a member of the Western Hemisphere volunteer pools, and my current role with them is as the regional governance consultant. And I was super excited to be able to pick up Marnie from the airport last night and welcome her to Canada.
Absolutely, because I'm a member of Girl Scouts of the USA, as Angela is a member of the Girl Guides of Canada. So we're really excited to be here with you today to share some tips on how to recruit that awesome board that's going to move your organization forward. And as we know, once your organization becomes stronger, the opportunities to grow membership increase. So I'd like to start off with a few quick reasons on why having a strong board matters. Then we'll talk a little bit about recruitment. And then we're going to really dive into that conversation that you have with a potential new board member. So how does that sound?
Sounds good to me.
Great. If anyone has any questions or wants to raise any issues throughout this webinar, you can feel free to go ahead and put the question into the question or into the chat on the webinar there on the right side, and we'll be sure to include it in our discussion today. So let's get started. So one of the things I do want to say before we actually dive in is that when we're talking about, for this webinar, when we're talking about boards or councils or executives, we're going to use the word board.
It's probably good that we all understand that starting off, right?
Right, but the things that we're talking about are applicable no matter what you call the group. So I was most recently a part of some really fantastic governance discussions that took place at the Girl Scout National Convention that was held in Salt Lake City in October. We are all pretty passionate about governance, and I should say that this is in WAGGGS from around the world. So Girl Scouts of the USA to our lovely MOs in the Caribbean and all around the world. So what we're working on now is really top of mind for everyone. But when I was in Salt Lake City, I really came upon a few things that I wanted to share with everyone here today, and Angela wanted to share. And one of those that really caught my attention was this idea that our board is one of our most outwardly facing pieces of PR. I know we all think that it's our girls and our parents that are actually telling our stories. But to those people that are important donors, more importantly, community partners, and other potential board members, our current board is our best ambassador. So I'm going to put it all out on the kitchen table where I am sitting today. If our boards have a bad reputation, then our organization starts to have a bad reputation. And no one wants to become a part of an organization that has a bad reputation. And let's be honest, people who are frustrated and angry talk way more than the happy ones, right?
Absolutely.
I also want to say that your board is also your legacy. And I say your legacy as those of you who are on the executive currently, or those of you who are maybe part of a nominating committee. That board, yes, the board of this exact moment is your legacy. But for your member organization, your board is that legacy, the legacy of your MO that will carry you far beyond any of the rest of us here. So let's talk a little bit about recruitment. And I think recruitment kind of falls into three little buckets. We have board assessment, it's personal capital, and it's my term. So Angela, could you tell me a little bit about this kind of strange thing called a board assessment?
Gladly, Marnie. And really, board, we've already covered what that is. I'm fine with that. But assessment, that's a really big word. And I think people can get a little bit concerned or afraid when they hear that one. They really look at it probably as something where I'm going to check mark and are things being done well or not. And true, that is part of what an assessment is. But I don't think it's something that we need to necessarily be afraid of. So when we're doing an assessment, there's a few things that we want to look at. And, we'll talk a little bit about some of them right now. The first one that we want to look at is what's called the length of term. And so that's the who's leaving and who's staying. So it's really knowing how long somebody can stay on your board for. That'll be written in your constitution. And when the constitution says your time is up, your time is up. And so you have to pass that one on. So that's a really important thing to look at when you're looking at how your board functions or how it's going to function in the future. Who's still on that board? Who leaves it? What is that length of term? Another thing that you're going to want to look at is to what extent your board members are actually involved in the work that they're doing. We don't have the luxury of having 100 people on our board. We likely have very few people on our board or a smaller number, and you really, really need to make sure that everybody who's there is doing the work that they need to be doing. And so how involved are they in doing what they need to be doing? And then lastly, it's really looking to see whether the board is doing the work that they need to be doing. So we're hoping that your board has set some objectives at the front end of the year, but have they actually been successful and have they managed to do what they set out to do? This is not something that's going to be done at the end of a meeting for the last 5 minutes before you all rush out the door for the next thing. It is really something that takes a little bit more time, and not only time, but also some planning and some preparation to make sure that the people feel comfortable within that one.
Yep.
And, in all honesty, doing a board assessment is probably one of the things that your current board might fear the most to hear, because it really can make them feel as if they as a board have failed. And this may or may not be true, but without doing the assessment, you're never going to know that one. So it's a conversation that's going to be very, very delicate. It'll be really important that the people that are having the conversation are very honest and upfront with each other. And if you're the facilitator for this one thing we'd really recommend is that there has to be a lot of patience around the table. It's teasing information out and really letting people take the time to think and to say what it is that they need to say. But the positive thing that we can give you is to remember that everybody who's part of your member organization is there because they believe in the mission and the vision of your organization. So use that as that positive hook. They want to absolutely be the best organization that you can be.
Well, and I think also, Angela, in our skills audit webinar, which is coming up and will be on demand very soon, we talk about this idea of look at the board as a whole.
Absolutely. It's a great way to look at it. And
not so much to look at as individuals at this point, even though we know individuals will be exchanged or brought on to fill certain roles. At this time, you should really be looking at yourselves as a whole organization or a whole group.
It's much less threatening for the people that are there too.
Exactly.
So yeah, no, very, very, very good point, Marnie. And absolutely, for those of you that are interested, we do have that whole webinar going on. So we then actually have the seats that we need to fill, and we have the skills that we need. So where do we go from here?
Yeah, that's a really good question. It's time for everyone on the board to generate a list of possible new members from their networks. And so how do you go about determining exactly, we've got our skills, but we kind of need some job descriptions. And again, we are going to go more into job descriptions in our succession planning webinar. So we've got a webinar on succession planning, one on skills audit, and even one on having difficult conversations, which are all going to be readily available. So one thing I'll have to say is when you're brainstorming about who would be the perfect person to fill a need on your board, keep in mind that you're asking people to bring their personal capital to the table. And so what does this exactly mean? Well, a person has 3 different types of capital. They have financial capital, intellectual capital, and network capital. Now, it was kind of the old thinking, especially in the United States, that you would ask someone to either bring their financial capital to your organization or their time, right? We wouldn't necessarily ask for both. Well, people sat around and realized that we're missing a huge asset if we only ask for someone to give us time, and maybe they have access to lots of money, or we were asking them only to give money, but it turns out they have these amazing resources within their network. So for this, we're not really that interested in financial capital. So we really want to focus on intellectual and network capital. So intellectual capital is a person's wisdom, skills, expertise. This could be what they went to college for, they have a degree in or a certificate. This is something that they're an expert in. And network capital is that person's personal and professional networks. This is all about who they know. And you want people to bring their intellectual and network capital to your organization. So when they do that, the organization gets stronger. Just think, if you asked a banker to join your board because you really needed her to help you with your financials, and if you only asked her to just bring her intellectual capital, she'd fix your books right up. Then you wouldn't have come to realize that she has a friend who would love to give a workshop for girls on financial literacy. And by making sure that when you're asking someone to join your board, that they're bringing all of their capital to the organization, you would then have a fantastic opportunity to really grow membership in your community, because people will have heard about the financial literacy course and know that the Girl Guides and Girl Scouting is a place that they want their children to be. But if you'd only asked about just the intellectual capital, you'd only have great books and not this opportunity to really grow your membership.
And I think one of the things, Marnie, that we've seen a fair bit is that people may have a role or get a role simply because they've had a number of other roles on their board, and this is the one that they haven't had. And we had a fairly lengthy discussion about this with our national advisors, but I still think it's important to bring it back here. That really, and if I use it as an example, I don't know, say the international commissioner, sure, the international commissioner needs to know stuff about other countries and so on, and she may have a love of travel, but that's really not sufficient for her to be the international commissioner. It's a hard discussion to have, but she really needs to then understand that because we're looking at all of this capital, she needs to be able to have and to be able to bring a variety of different parts to it. And just liking something is not sufficient. She needs to understand that. And I think, in all likelihood, because we're all trying to make our member organizations stronger, she will hopefully be able to understand that she needs to leave that place to somebody that can bring all of that, so that really, in turn, the membership can grow. And then who knows, maybe she can do something else. Maybe she can, in turn, work with some girls that are off traveling somewhere and give them some hints and tips about things to know about the country they're going for, or how to apply for the various either visas or passports or something like that. There's a way to use her within the organization, but on the board may not be the best place for her.
Exactly, and that is a tough conversation to have. I also want to talk a little bit about this idea of my term. And earlier we talked in the board audit about term lengths. And I think term lengths is a great way of thinking about the roles within an organization. This idea that this is my term and I will own it, and I will own being international commissioner because that was what I deserved, is not a thinking that actually continues to grow the organization. More of the thinking should be, this is my length of term. My length of term is 3 years, and that's the moment that I get to be the international commissioner, and then I pass that role on to someone else. So not only is the person in that role, but also other members of your board thinking about succession planning and who would be a fantastic person to bring in on this role, rather than this idea of incredible ownership of roles on your board. So it's not easy to start changing the way of thinking, but I think it's an interesting place to start. All right, one of the things that I think is most critical in recruiting a new board member is the conversation that a designated person has. And your designated person could be a member of your board or of your nominating committee. But the conversation that that person has with a potential new board member is absolutely critical.
That would be a really tough conversation too in some cases, wouldn't it, Marnie?
Absolutely. And so I think you have to approach this conversation with a very bit of an open mind. And Karen Osborne, one of the facilitators at the Girl Scout National Convention, had some very interesting suggestions on how to have this important and sometimes tricky conversation. And one of those was do not fear no. I know we are all a little nervous, if we're honest, about being rejected when we ask for something. But we can't have the fear of something stop us from doing what we think is in the best interest of our member organization. We will never be able to know if someone is interested in being a part of our organization if we don't ask them.
I guess that comes to some of the ways the how we should be asking some.
Absolutely.
Part of having that conversation, one of the things that's really important is that we remain professional about it. In the end, we want people to join our organization. We want them to think of us as a professional organization that works well and that runs well. And that has to show right from the very, very first impression that you have with them. So if you're coming out to ask somebody to meet with you, we suggest that you send an email or write a letter, probably not a text, not in this circumstance, and be very, very specific. You want to meet with them for a certain amount of time, define what that is. Meeting for 10 minutes is very different than meeting for an hour. And you want to meet them at a certain location, on a certain date. They may or may not be available. And so if they're not, please keep that professional as well. And don't respond to that with not a big deal, talk to you later. But see if you can set another date for them. If they say completely they're not at all interested, we need to respect that and acknowledge that one as well. When you're talking to them, talk about trying to engage them. You want to have a language that talks about engagement. That'll be important because in the end, that's some of what you want. But as much as we're talking about wanting to get engagement from them, one of the things we really caution you is that when you sit down with them, remember, this is a conversation. So there's talking that happens from both sides. Don't start it off by saying, hi, this is so great that you've been able to meet me. This is what we would like you to do. This is what we want from you. You have to build that relationship with them. Find out about them. They may be somebody that you know a lot, maybe a little, but really you have to find out from them what they want with their life, what impact that they would like to have on their community, on their country, on the wider world, and try to be able to indicate to them how Girl Guiding or Girl Scouting can allow them to have that impact and to leave the legacy that they want. So it's building that conversation around that idea, not simply a straight out, this is what we would like.
Absolutely. And I think also you need to tailor your discussion. You can't have a canned presentation or a canned conversation with every person that you approach. And I think one interesting thing to keep in mind is that older board members or older potential board members are interested in solving problems. So come to your conversation armed with some information about how Girl Scouting and Girl Guiding has helped solve problems in your community and in the world or in your country. Now, younger board members or potential board members are interested in the impact on the individual. So come to that discussion with some information about specific girls who have gone out and changed the world, or because they've been a part of guiding, they've had these unique experiences. But I think we always need to remain positive.
So Marnie, before we go on to being positive, and I'm certainly not disagreeing that we should be, but we've had a question come in from Kate.
Sure.
And as much, I think it relates a little bit to what we're talking here about having older and younger members on our board. So having a mix, because we certainly want some type of a balance there. But Kate's question relates more to having people from within the board, within guiding and outside of guiding on their board. And her question is whether there should be a balance, or if there is a balance we should be trying to get from members in and outside of guiding, or uniformed and non-uniformed.
Exactly. Well, I think that's a great question, and thank you so much, Kate. I think that the answer is specific to each MO. On what are the exact needs of the member organization, and as it relates to the strategic plan.
Could probably add into that a number of constitutions would allow for a board to have elected and nominated positions.
Exactly.
And you may very often find that the nominated positions are those that come from the outside of guiding. And so that when you go through your board, you go through your elections and you look at your strategic plans and you finish your elections and realize there may be some skills for which you don't actually have anybody represented on your board that has that skill. You may actually need to go out and nominate somebody with that specific skill.
Right.
So it really does come down to the Constitution.
It does come down to the Constitution and the needs of your MO at this moment.
So then let's stay with being positive.
Yeah.
And Kate, that was a great one, and certainly appreciate that one. If there's others, let us know. So as we were saying, when you're having these discussions with people, we want to be able to stay positive, and absolutely really important if that's going to be someone from outside of guiding that you have.
Absolutely.
You want to really be able to talk very passionately about the organization. You want to be able to say the good of it, but it's not a place for us to be airing our dirty laundry. By any means, at some point, if the person's going to be on our board, they're going to have to know it. We need to keep that transparency, but not during a very first meeting.
Right.
So really, as Marnie had said, really stressing that importance of talking about how the organization has had an impact on the girls, maybe on yourself, on the community, and how the person who would fulfill this role can have that same impact.
Yeah. And I think also that after you've had that conversation, you need to be sure to follow up. I know that when we've picked someone or selected someone who we think would be fabulous, we really want to get that yes from them. And sometimes you will. Sometimes you'll get these fantastic yeses the moment you walked in the door. But other times you need to let people have time to think. And at the end of your meeting, feel free to leave some literature behind about your organization and then say, you know what, I'm going to follow up with you on Thursday.
Make sure you do.
And make sure you do. And to say to them that when I follow up, let's talk about how we can really, get you involved in guiding and scouting in our country.
And probably also realizing that if they say they need more time, leave them that.
Too.
Right? We're not trying to be pushy and push them into making a decision. We want to make sure that if people are coming and joining our board, that they've made a very sound decision and that they're fully committed to that one.
Right, and exactly. We want to be sure that they have the time to commit to our organization and of course the desire as well.
Another question that's come in here from Valencia, and she's asked, who is on the board?
Very good question.
So Valencia, as a response to you, in some ways, it's part of the same response we gave to Kate, but that's really written in your Constitution.
It is.
And really, for any of you who've not seen the Constitution of your MO, we'd highly recommend that you go and take a look at that one, request it, and read it through. Your Constitution will outline the people that are to be on your board. Now, in a number of organizations, if you have an executive and a council, it will outline both of those. But very often we'll find that it's the chief commissioner, a president, a treasurer, usually a variety of different commissioners. And then you may have just some additional groups of interested parties. We've often seen community representatives or young girl representatives, but that's really outlined in your Constitution. So Valencia, that's not one that I can answer very specifically for any member organization, but really if you go back to your Constitution, that will actually outline who that is for you. They're all elected members, or the boards all have members that are elected. I didn't mean to say that every person on the board will be elected, but a number of people will be there as a result of an election. And that's where you actually have the ability to determine who will be on your board. So if it comes down to the who is it, that actually becomes part of something that you can likely influence.
Absolutely. And, we talked about how this is a pretty difficult conversation. And, we recommend that you use some of the NLDP methods to practice. And as we were talking in one of our other webinars, like it's okay to think about what could be the best outcome of your conversation and the worst outcome of the conversation, because then you're prepared for anything that could happen. So,
I guess it brings us almost to our final thoughts.
It does bring us to our final thoughts, which are that you want being a member of your board to be the thing that the most influential people want to do in your community.
So you want them basically to have bragging rights.
Exactly.
I'm a member of the board of Girl Guides or Girl Scouts of this country.
Exactly. You want them to tell all of their friends and at all of the parties to say, you won't believe all of the amazing things and the amazing opportunities that I've had to change my community by being a member of the board of your MO. So you want to, in a way, want being a member of your board to have social capital. And in turn, have a wonderful group of people who are lined up to become a part of your organization.
That sounds fantastic. I can't wait to see all of these people and to meet every one of them.
Exactly. And I do want to mention one other thing, and that is that WAGGGS has a really excellent resource on succession planning. And you can get that from any WAGGGS resource area. And it is available in French and Spanish and English.
So I guess this does actually bring us to an end. We certainly hope that it's been helpful for you and that you've gotten something out of it. We're going to leave you with our email addresses because I don't see any other questions coming in. But certainly if you do have extra questions that come, please feel free to email Marnie or myself. We'd be more than thrilled to answer your questions and help you in any which way that we can. All of it really looking to try to see how we can have as many strong member organizations as possible.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.